We're live.
Excellent. Hello, world. This is the Interpretives Temple, which is the largest demographic we have in Podlair right now. So it's really cool. We get to see a wide spread of mojos and address topics that are better addressed when we have a fuller spread of mojos to comment on it. All right. So tonight we are going to be talking a bit about how work and workflow, like the Zez channel, how that works if you have Xi or Z conscious, and then is the logic-based channel a momentum channel or a modulation channel. That'll be a shorter conversation, and then we'll get into the larger focus of tonight, which is going to be interpretives in comedy. The comedy bubble of all the demographics we've studied so far. We've done over 100 different distinct bubbles. There is no other bubble that singles out the interpretive so much. Every gender mojo of the interpretives is represented, and only, which is like 16, and only 2 of the gender mojos for literal show up with any frequency, and they aren't that frequent. So it's interesting to look at that bubble and see what it does for the tribe and why interpreters like to do it. So introductions, we'll get into it. I am Nai G Coach.
I am Shiny Shreddy.
I'm Ziny Ademus.
I am Nai G Ben.
This is Nai G Glenn.
And Nijai Starblow.
Cool. So Mitchell may be joining us, possibly Bruno, but likely not, as he's doing his sleep cycle flip over. That's how it works when you have non-24. So he will be out of the loop the next few days. And then Infinity is also busy tonight. But we may see Bruno and probably see Mitchell. All right. So the first topic, I was simply mentioning casually when we were off air. I'm working on the movie timeline push, and I don't want to give that what it's the intricacies of that, except that I'm deep into it now, and it is the largest feat I've done, and the numbers as far as the media things to be tracked and the amount of samples that are embedded in them, the numbers are far larger than any number I've done before. So I was just mentioning casually, which brought up a conversation, which is that as a Xi user, and the fact that there's also a modulation power for me, I often need to get into a headspace, like for me with working movie timeline, where my G gets motivated by like the stories I'm seeing, and it's reminding me of different personal lessons I learned. That allows me to have a lot of, horsepower and fuel to go. And then my Xi is aware I need to do these things in a certain way in order to get Z credit. And so as a part of that, I will playfully, like, it's almost like I'm doing a video game. It's kind of a look at it. My G gets engaged because of the personal experience, and then going through it, it's a bit like a video game. My Xi sees it that way. It's kind of like, hey, let me do a few more rounds of a ninja game. It's kind of how I'm motivating myself. And so kind of like that one person was talking about the power of like gaming. If I can do that, I'm able to get higher Z numbers than for me personally if I was to concentrate on that. But there's 2 elements of why that is. One is that I'm a Xi user. I have Xi consciousness, a playful logic-based power, and then also it is modulation for me. And so then Ademus was making some good points about the difference between that. For him, he's similar, but also different. So Ademus, I'll hand over to you, and then you can take from there. And then I think Starglow also had some things to say, and we'll just keep the ball rolling.
Yeah, so we were talking about our relationship to, working on some kind of project, and since me and Coach both have Xi, which is an adaptive power, then there's an adaptive and playful element to doing our project or working on our craft without so much as directly considering the structuredness of how Z is going to score it. I'll start by saying my take on that, which is that since I'm Zenez, I have the logic-based channel higher, then I always like to start with an idea of how Z scores things. And, at where I'm at, I guess as a music artist or anything else, I like to seek out first how Z scores things, watch other people, and then see how it hits people, and how it moves them, how it impacts them, why they like it, you know, all these things to have kind of this framework that's a model that I can already carry with me. But then I like to go into my little cave with my own devices and then just start playing. Just playing with different things, ideas. I make music, so I can put in that context, like playing with different kinds of sounds, different kinds of melodies, just spending time not really worrying too much about a deadline, not worrying about making it even coherent. But through that process of playing, I will eventually land on something strong, something that jives with that the standard of Z that I have already kind of absorbed. And once I hit that, then I all of a sudden have something to hold on to. And I continue the process of kind of playing around, but now I'm playing around this concept that I already have. And having something that I know is going to hit hard motivates me to keep going and follow through with it, you know?
Definitely. Thank you. Starla, I think you had some thoughts as well. And you're a Jai and Z user, as is Jailene. So mentioned to hear your guys.
Right, so for Nijai, we already, since Z is only it's our third power, so it's relatively, it's not momentum, but it's high up on the, you know, conscious awareness. We're always aware of that's how Z gets scored. So we already have the concept of how the world's going to score something natively. But as an adaptive, my flags forward are offside. So, like, it's not native for me to flag forward. But I know that's the way the world sees what I've done. So what happens is the numbers for me give me that Z flag forward, which tags back to my Jai, which gives me a little Jai squee jolt. You know, like, so I can tag back and forth on that Z to Jai, you
That's
know.
cool, that positive modulation relationship between the two powers. Cool.
So we can as long as I'm not and it gets really because it goes all the way down to Vi for Nijai. So like that detail gives me the new number, which gives me the Jai jolt, which gives me the new number, which gives me the. It's like this constant tag thing, and it's really awesome. And then to bring it all the way down my peak pathway. The reason why I'm doing something, the Jai of it is always, like, I don't do a Z without a Jai reason for it, because that's momentum for me. So the point of doing something is for the tribe. So when I get the numbers and I get those numbers, my Uther goes, ooh, bonus for the tribe. And then it brings it all the way down the pathway. It's just, when you get really going on something and that Vi hits the 9, it's like, oh, that's the best thing in the world.
I'm curious, Shailene, for you, the Jai with the Z, the kind of reward system, how they work together to, like, basically do workload that's pleasing to oneself. It's kind of the cool thing, how it works.
Yeah, well, I guess my Jai, so I have Z as a conscious as well, even though it's polar. So I have some awareness of how things are scored natively. So then my Jai, you know, if it is it in this context, like if you Jai wants something, is it coming from like my Jai wants something, then I go exploring with my knee, and then.
I guess for all the conversation is sort of like where Z falls in you, how it works as a part of your peak pathway.
So it starts very freeform for me then with the Jai and what resonates internally, and then I go out seeking with the possibilities of me, and then, you know, use that Vi as the worldview, like recording stuff, I suppose. But but getting to the Z, so I'll be aware that things are being scored and that they're structured, but it's modulation, major modulation. So it's tougher for me to get my head around.
Can I ask you a question on that one?
Like such an amorphous, like how would I put this amorphous resonation into a structure.
So it doesn't give you that immediate tag, like it does for Nijai. It doesn't give you that immediate Jai to Z tag.
But
do.
a question on that. So the tag's not immediate, but a question I did have that unrelated to that is when you step away to your Jai, are you? Because when I step away, for example, away from like thinking of the Z, I literally, I think most G mojos would say this, is that you forget about it. Like it's a problem, you have to kind of use people to constellate, otherwise if you basically don't look at your friends and say, what time is it?
Yeah.
You will not tend to look into the clock as much. So I'm curious, when you step away to the Jai, how is it, say different from Starglow, your Jai still does have conscious awareness of Z.
Yeah, it does, and sometimes, sometimes it's like if you know you do this certain Z and you get rewards, then you're gonna go and do it, and then get the bonuses, the Jai bonuses and Z bonuses, from doing that, from putting that, from hitting the Z. But a lot of times it's sort of a nagging thing sometimes.
I see.
Like at some point
Ooh.
to structure it. But it's like that's not how it starts, and it kind of wants to go wild and then but at some point you have to make it work in some sort of power dynamics and some sort of structured system dynamic.
I was just going to add, I get that because Vi does that for me. Those details just nag me on getting the tag and the Z. I've got the Vi details going, zzz, it's like buzzing in my ear. So I get the switch between the Vi and the Z for me.
It can also be like, I think, a positive. Obviously, it's going to be a bit of the modulation element to it, but this discomfiture. But it can actually be very rewarding because I know, say, Jai Mojos, when they go inside and they process, there can be difficulty processing to a true, authentic state that also will relate to a better position in the world. If when they're processing, even their deep Jai, there's not some kind of awareness to like maybe Z consequences or behavior they've done or what counts. You mean like something when they're in there? Because that way when they're processing, it's like a Jai pump. But when it comes back out, it should have from the pump itself be well designed to link up to its modulator power.
That's true. I mean,
No. So I'm curious. Do you forget that when you're really deep, or does it?
Yeah, you kind of forget that when you're really deep.
Is it the same for you, Starglow? Do you, when you get like, if you're deeply in your Jai resonating, does the framework go? Or I guess it doesn't really. Obviously, it doesn't go away, but do you stop noting it?
Specify a little bit more for me. Put that in a little bit better context.
Jilene, about obviously mathematically the Jai and Z are always together, but when you go deep into the Jai, I just noticed it seems like when that's done well, and I was curious if it's an aware process, it seems like when it's done well, when they come back out, they're able to reconnect, for example, into Z with more realistic hopes, more things they can actually do that are aligned.
Yeah.
But when you're in there, that connection, you're in there, or that just sort of happens. So.
I guess I'm having a hard time just conceptualizing just being in the Jai without having. Actually, I think at the end of the day, you always have a connection to all your other powers, regardless. It wouldn't be the same thing for
Okay,
and V.
Can I give an example?
Yeah.
Let's say you're doing something, anything, and you get Z'd. You didn't have enough money, or you weren't treated the way you thought was a good ranking treatment, so forth, and now you've come home and you're like processing that.
Yeah.
When you're processing to get through it, does that remain some kind of distant, like why your Jai is kind of like pumping extra more today?
Oh no, not.
Or do you kind of like go singing and you just pump and then maybe that comes back?
Well, then I like, let's say if it's something like where you don't have you didn't have enough money to pay for something. Then when I get home to process my Jai, then I'd have to start addressing then I'd use my other powers because I'd be like, well, why did I run out of money? Did I Did I spend more on lattes this week, than I usually spend, or what caused me to go broke, and try to fix that so I don't have a repeat of what happened and made my Jai feel bad.
Gotcha. No,
Yeah,
thank
see, and for the Nijai, the Z is right on top of the Jai. So like the Z never can get. Now I can shut off to a pretty big degree the Vi details and tamp those down quite a bit. But the Z for me that's how the world scores. I can't get rid of that even in my even in my deepest Jai tower, because that's the system on which out there scores me. And to score me badly makes my Jai feel really bad. So to have the bad thing happen and then to not have the ability to process why it happened and how to not make it happen again so that I don't have that big bad Jai ding again, that's just no.
Similar.
So we can't ever get rid of the Z as adaptives. Now I don't know if that,
No, that's cool because everyone else here has the combination of G with the Xi or Xi with G, which comes at it differently. I'm curious, the other Naiji here, experiences you may have had similar, like I'm doing, like I said, the timeline right now, where you take something you know you have to do and like try to formulate into some kind of game where like, oh, I'm this character. Like when I do a lot, it's like, ooh, I'm a diver. I'm diving in pop culture. Ooh, I'm Sherlock Holmes. And I kind of like get into a character that feels like doing this work. I'm curious if you guys ever do that to get stuff done.
A fun thing to do is to like kind of speed run it, kind of see like how fast can I do it. You can make a game doing that, and ironically, just doing that gets it done faster. So it's like you can kind of say on like I'm going to do this like as exceptionally as I possibly can, in certain ways that people don't normally do. Another thing is we were talking about earlier how like you weren't like looking at the numbers or something.
I look at them very periodically. Like I look at them like, yeah, I know what that is.
You want it to be kind of more of a surprise periodically.
Maybe, I guess to a degree, yeah. I kind of want to keep it off my mind as much as I can because it kind of makes me feel wobbly if it's too heavily on my mind.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, I keep checking in to like note at periods of time, like, am I making progress? That you know what I mean. But if I check in too frequently, it can kind of.
Yeah, I tend to do that too. I don't really check on exactly how much I've done too often. I try to just kind of do what I do for a period of time. How I feel like doing it, and then check back, see how I'm doing, so I can kind of plan ahead and get an idea of things. But
so I think maybe y'all have a Xi sort of back of the brain sort of balancing. Am I on the plus side of this or the minus side of this? Sort of Xi balancing. Y'all don't have to do the numbers. Like for me to get I don't have that Xi balancing. Am I on the plus side? I've got to actually have the number, and I think for Xylene it's probably the same thing. Because we don't have that Xi weighing that can go on sort of subconsciously.
Yeah. Because like what Ben was saying is because we have that kind of Xi just sort of floating there, knowing if we're like over the line or not, we can make a game, and we're like, if I do this game and I get good at it, it's a vague term Z-wise, but not for G. It means to get pumped up and like get into it. If I get into this game, that will be a good amount of time spent. And then, if I can stack games, I'm going to be kicking ass. Those are kind of poetic terms, but that works very well for Xi and Xi. Because oftentimes we look at the humans, we're like, what are the other humans doing? How smart do they look? How pumped up are they? And how many hours they're putting in? And then I'm like, I think I can get as pumped up and put as many hours in. Then I kind of keep track of that. Like, I think I'm putting in good hours.
So,
I'm putting in good Kensei hours, and I have faith in that. But I have to check to see it periodically.
So I think for us, Shailene, maybe it's a little bit like we compare the numbers as compared to other humans, but we still have to have the number to be able to tell where we are.
Yeah, that gives us the bar, the score that needs to be achieved, or the ranking, whatever it is. But yeah, we need to have those numbers in order to like Struggle said, in order to compare ourselves to others out there in the world and how we're doing.
One thing automatically seems like the Z, either mental modulation is going to have more even workflow, because numbers are more even. Like for me, my G, if I'm in a certain mood or I can identify with a certain character, then I can do more than what Z would say is what you're supposed to do. But if I don't have that motivation, I will dip under it. There's a flex factor, like passion. There's a workflow, like by Z standards. I'm curious how it is for Demas, because he still has the same two powers flip. My workflow has a more fluctuation to it. Like it kind of bursts. It's more. I think Z's more even. Is it?
It's steady, like maybe you feel the same way, Jolene. Let me know if you don't. But it's like you steadily, step by step in the next thing. You take the next step and the next step and the next step. It's like
technical moves, or like measured technical moves.
Well, both, because like even if it's like I have to solve this problem and the next problem and the next problem, you just keep taking the next one, because you've also got the Vi on that end too. And I would think for you, that Vi being higher, that next Vi is much more linear than V as far as a literal power where, the outside environment. So we talked about this before. The V is the inhaling of the environment, but the Vi is the linear step-by-step detail, next detail.
Yeah, and that for me, for you, Z and Vi, for me, Vi and Z. So mine is like methodical, meticulous, stepping out of these technical steps, to get that score, or ranking, or to achieve, whatever needs to be achieved in the.
Yes, so we can still be overachievers. Like a lot of Nijai tend to be, and probably Jaini too, tend to be like overachievers. But we do it because they got 100%, but I'm gonna get 100% and get the bonus points too. When I was taking a test, I would get, that would be, I'm going to get that 100%, and I'm going to get those bonus points on the back end. So, but it's still much more linear. It's not a sort of, where the subconscious gets to weigh it all the time. We don't have that.
Like freeform scoring of like this power.
Well, I guess it is freeform as just Xi to Z, but because Xi is connected to G, it freeform weighs. But actually, it doesn't score with Xi. Xi and Xi don't really score like that. They weigh. You score with G, which is, am I better than that person? Or am I better than the me from yesterday? Or was that a good me on the mat for 2 hours? Or was that like a slovenly, half-hearted me? That's kind of Z, like, scores.
Mm-hmm.
So I think y'all play against yourselves more often, and Z Mojos are more often playing against everybody else, because we're playing against the numbers.
Or like the system's ranking.
Right.
No. I think we're playing against we also play against everyone else too, just in a different way. I was going to say that like independence of mind is generally associated with G, but there's an aspect to that in Xi as well, in that I kind of understand that I'm doing my own thing, and what I do, I'm seeing as it's tactical for me. And it may not be something that's recognized by the Z, so maybe it lands on it sometimes, maybe it's not. But for the most part, I probably don't care.
Right.
If it's getting where I want to go, and I can see that I'm getting to where I want to get, then like the Z scoring isn't that important to me for the most part. Sometimes it is. It depends on if it suits whatever my agenda is.
So does that mean that your other part of like what makes it your other is that the Z rates you in a way that you feel is correct to be rated? Is that part of the relationship? Because it seems like if it wasn't, then you would dismiss the Z.
Right. Yeah.
So your other
least,
has a lot of Z that you do not want to dismiss. That kind of
Right. It's a kind of Z that that I want to impress, you know, that is out there and that is acknowledging whatever actual truth, you know, I'm trying to land on.
Right, you're kind of
Right. Right. I totally understand what you're coming
And
from.
our independence comes out of that this thing that I've chosen to do. We don't necessarily, like, if we choose to go a different way from the majority Z, say
The
we
norm.
choose an alternative route, we're going by what's pleasing to our Jai, and then it's our Uther that says, oh, that Jai, yes, that's ultimately good for the tribe, and so you keep doing that, even if you're not going to get a good score by the majority Z.
Gotcha. Glenn, I'd like to hear also from your point of view as well.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about like the Xi in terms of like the weighing of it. Very much like when I'm like reading a sample or something, Xi is a lot more in the moment. So it's sort of like you're surfing on a wave and you have to make sure that you're not falling off the board. It's very much like that, and so it's sort of like you're trying to feel out, like, am I on it? Am I close? Then what I do is I tend to sort of like lean in certain directions to see, does that feel better? Does this feel a little bit better, or does this feel a little bit like I'm losing a sort of like a connection with my shiny baby, with my other, with like a feel good connection? And so that's kind of like how I figure out like which way to go. And I'm very sort of like conservative, I guess. I don't like to try and make too, you know, drastic of a move, but sometimes I will do that as well. Just see like where will I end up. But I try to just like very much find little nudges that I can try and like get to where I need to be. Z, I think, is a lot more. It's different in the way that it works. Z is sort of like when I get the score back on the quiz, and then I'm like, okay, so basically everything that I was doing was kind of like, it was either good or it was like just a waste of my time. And I was just sort of like, I was falling off the surfboard when I didn't even realize. But yeah, it's sort of like, even those teach me as far as like, so this, I thought I was feeling this, but actually this is what I was really feeling, and trying to like really reverse engineer, trying to figure out like, well, that's what was going on, is very enlightening. And it's also sort of like, it doesn't always make sense to me, so I'm like, oh, okay, I'll just, maybe the next quiz will help me figure that out later, or maybe like sometime in the future I'll figure that out. But it's very much like that. Yeah.
No, definitely. As a part of that, that's like the general process. That was excellent. Could you also maybe talk a bit about motivating yourself if you're like, I need to get some Z. I got to stack some Z. I know for Naiji, going directly at that generally doesn't work well, but there's all kinds of ways you can like get yourself like, oh yeah, I'm going to stack some Z today. Do you have any methods you've used over the years of like, okay, I know I got to do a bunch of Z. How am I going to get pumped for that?
Well, what I find is that if I know that, okay, I have to like do certain tasks for the day, then immediately, like even the day before that I actually do, like it might be the next day, I'll just be like geared up even when I go to sleep, like, okay, I'm going to sleep and then I'm going to get up and I'm going to do all these things, and it's just sort of like, then I just do them. And it kind of feels sometimes like, well, you know, it's kind of like a little bit of a drag because it's like it's work and it's like menial labor, stuff like that. And if you focus too much on that, I guess you can sort of like get sucked into that kind of thinking. But it just sort of like you do it and then it's done and then you don't ever have to do it again. Or at least not in that same exact way again. It's not always going to be the same exact way. It's so I don't know. I just kind of like make myself do it. Yeah.
You actually mentioned a couple of interesting things there that I know motivate me as well. I'm curious how other people feel. One is visualizing. Is that if I have to do a bunch of Z, it's like, well, I will kind of plan to. I generally, if I'm going to do Z for like say 7 days, it works good for me to not start immediately. If I can have a day to visualize and kind of like get myself dialed in, I will start getting energy. And like Glenn's saying, I'll go to bed like charged up, and then I'll come out like a rocket and kind of like hit it. But then, as a part of that, I'm curious you can do this as well. I plan that I have something else on the other end of it. Like when I'm done with this, I'm gonna have this super tasty meal. You know, some kind of like, you know, I'm gonna get a new video game or something. Whatever. It's like, you know, okay, I'm gonna visualize. I'm gonna hammer through it, and then I'm gonna like a reward. So that's one thing. The other one is you're saying, I say all the time, Charlene knows, I say this mantra all the time. It's just one time. You know what I mean? If I can say myself, it's a lot of the Z, but it's one time.
Does it bonus?
And the third element, which you didn't mention this one, Glenn, but I'm curious about it because it's very important for me, is I try to get into a character that would find this activity appealing. So like when I was doing martial arts, I imagined myself as like a samurai or a kensei or whatever. When I'm doing like deep diving and purifications, I like to watch Bering Sea Gold where they dive. Things like that, it helps you kind of get into character. So visualizing, getting into character, and just one time, buddy. Just one time you do this and you don't have to do it anymore.
Right.
But
on that actually.
Oh, sorry, please go ahead, Glenn.
Just two more points I wanted to say. It's the one-time thing, but it's also like I won't really remember this later. You know what I mean? Because sometimes when you're in the moment, you know, it's kind of like, yeah, it's very much like that. Like I'm gonna do this, but I'm not gonna remember any of the hard shit later.
Disassociation.
Yeah, like 15 minutes later, I'm not even gonna feel tired. It's just gonna feel like I'm gonna be on to the next thing. And also, you were mentioning something, but it was
being in character or visualizing.
Getting in character, yeah. I usually try to figure out like, how is this activity gonna be beneficial for me? Like, what can I get out of it? Like, what kind of like, I try to think about like always thinking in terms of like I'm getting something out of this activity. Like I'm becoming better in this other kind of like interesting way that I'm not able to see right now.
That's important. So when you say get better, it's good clarification because that's kind of how I do it as well. You kind of mean like your character sheet is going to get ability clicks. Yeah, that's a good motivator.
Right.
Sure. Charlene?
Exactly.
Oh, I was just wondering, like, curious, because how it is for you guys, because I think for myself, and I have a feeling for Struggle and Yujai would be the same, is, like, one thing that does give us energy, or gives me energy, is, like, to do the Z activity, is if I do that Z activity, I'm setting it up for the future, like, I'm setting the system up that then I can reap rewards for multiple iterations, and then if I pull that off, then it's like I get a huge like lift because I'm like, oh, this is gonna like be a big earner. Like,
yes. So wait, yes. So like, okay. So I'm curious, Jailene. So the reward thing at the end, I don't find that works so well for me. So like, if I study all this and I go take my test, and you know, like a Naiji might say, after I take the test, I get you know, special treat, the special meal. I don't find that motivates me at all because my treat doesn't come till the Z score comes. Like my whole thing is like I don't get my treat till I find out how the professor graded my paper. So that
okay, that's interesting.
That reward doesn't work for me. Like the meal at the end of the studying does diddly squat for me. I got to get the score. My jolt comes from completing the task and the Z score.
Okay, that's a difference between, say, G, for example, is like in mixed martial arts, you have the Z of someone wins, someone loses. However, there's a G. If you give a great fight, personally, most of them feel like I was great tonight. If you have G, obviously you don't want to lose. That sucks. But there is a feeling of like I performed better than I've ever performed tonight. There's a G feeling like that was great. That was great. And often the people sometimes G score of like that was amazing. You know, Z technically that's a loss on your record, but G that was a win. That's going to get talked about. People.
So mine only. The Z only comes out of like my personal best thing comes out. It's not the same way. It comes out of, was that a better than average score, and did I do better than I previously did? So like that's my thing, but it's still a score. It's not as it's Jolene, help me out with this because I'm having trouble articulating this.
No, I feel you on like the score really determines like the whether my drive feels
jolt.
a sense of accomplishment or not, that I've met the bar and won with the Z. But I have been known to, like, once I win the Z, then I'll like reward myself because it's like
Yes!
I put all this effort, to get that passing score, that win, and if I get that win, then I'm gonna reward myself.
Yes, essentially for me, one thing I do, and I'm curious how so G users might feel, I tend to go by my code of conduct. Like, Z's so foreign to me that if I'm anything where there's like a Z thing, I'm like, I don't even know how my talent lines up with that. I don't get it. But I know I want to try. And so I'll set myself of like, I have a summer. I'm going to be Kensei on this all summer. I'm going to make sure that I feel that my conduct was as strong as it could be and I was using it as I could during that period. If I do that, I generally feel okay with rewarding myself regardless of how the outcome happens.
Yeah, I feel guilty.
Yeah.
I'd feel guilty because I was supposed to meet this bar.
See, how I see it is that the reward is me. I'm the reward.
Yeah.
And like I motivate myself towards like if I get this flag forward, then future Ademus is going to be awesome. And it's like because of that, like I've never really cared that much about like honors in college or anything like that. But there are things that like I apply myself to just because I see that when I put this effort in, I'm going to be in this position, and that position is what I want. Yeah.
Yeah, and my other does help me with that. Like thinking more of like the character sheet, and if you are, moving towards getting those abilities or those bonuses for your character sheet, then you're actually doing it. Like I mean, that's if you're putting the effort and you're moving towards it, that's the win.
That's your Uther doing that for you. Like for us, we reach that, we hit that bar, and that bar then says, that means I have that ability, it's mine, and I can. It's like you said earlier, I earn with that. I that means that I can do this next time. But it's the Uther that says, yeah, and that means you're a hero. So, but that's not our native. Like the Uther is the one that says, oh yes, and that means you're a hero.
Yeah, and I think that having that as native, like native way of thinking for Adrons, for example, is like why. I know that I got caught in this, and I think I've seen other Adrons get caught in this of like just getting in the mode of like if I just ace all of my tests, then I'm winning. But sometimes like if you have to take a bunch of like classes that are really not really relevant to where if you envision where your character would want to, where you'd want your character to be, those would be the skills that you'd line up. But then it just gets into this mode of like I just get 100% at all of my tests, then that becomes an exercise into itself. You're not really getting further, and you can actually end up like with 100% on everything. Like you can end up
right. That's the whole Nijai super student thing, or the Jaini super student thing, that we fall into that trap. That is so common trap for us to fall into. Like I see that like a lot of my relatives and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like no, you have to think like what are you, what creature are you, what natural. And that is something that the regular because of the way the academic system is designed right now, like it's very easy to fall into that trap because like even when you're going towards a career, or a lot of times like you're not really stacking. Like if you were to actually, that's what the other helps too. If you actually were to think about it like on a blank canvas perspective from like a human being, how do you get to where you want to be? Like, how would you stack up those skills wouldn't necessarily be with the academic curriculum the way that it's conventionally set up, but
No, because that's the
yeah.
system
Yeah.
needs to be there. That is the system to be able to gain energy from the tribal, producer.
And something else I think that my Uther helped me out with was, I don't see if this resonates with you, Jolene, is that natively as a Z user, we would just do everything we could to get the hundreds on everything, right? Every test we get 100. But there's only so much time in the day, and there are certain classes that we know are more important towards getting the thing that we actually, via worldview, need to get to. And the Uther helps you weigh, okay, yeah, you want to get 100 on everything, but you got 2 tests, and you're going to get 100 on one and a 75 or an 80 on the other. This is the one you need to get the 100 on. Your Uther helps you with that, because that's a weighing thing, because we get the Z Jai Jolt just for the 100. But our Uther tells us which is the direction. You only have this much time. You don't want to get a 80 on both. You need to get a 100 on this one and an 80 on that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, that works that way for me as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we've come to a really nice place. It's almost at the halfway mark. Is there anything anyone else would like to put in there? Because we can go ahead and feel those now, and then we'll go ahead and move on. Anybody?
I was just gonna say, I'm a Naiji that tends to get good grades as well, and I think that, I mean, it has a lot to do with the Nai and the Zai, crushing perfectionism, things like that. For Naiji in particular, or for hunters in general, there has to be something in our worldview that actually motivates us to actually go and do it, for us to actually do it. Or I guess what can also happen is, for some reason for some reason we feel it either needs to be done or we want it to happen in some way.
One thing also.
Then we can. Wait, what?
I was saying real quick is that I think for G-Mojos, going along what you're saying, is related that if we've been raised in a culture or had people we found admirable, if they're into kayaking or academics or whatever, that will heavily influence all 4 of the G-Mojos to have anyone they consider to be impressive or admirable growing up.
Yeah, like an actual person that you.
An actual person,
kind of
skill.
They think it's cool.
You think it's cool, and you're like, I want to be like that. And so you're like, I'm like that. When you're studying calculus or whatever, like, I'm like that person I thought was cool.
Like,
yeah.
Really
I do definitely relate to that. Like, yeah.
Or it might be like
The point you're making, Ben? I do want to cut you off.
Oh yeah, for sure. For me, it's kind of like there's kind of this fetishing on like always just weighing it right, always being being perfect, I guess. Like with the Z, I mean, you're kind of pushing and maneuvering things like that. With Xi, it's kind of like, am I weighing things right, measuring this out, walking, splitting this up into chunks right, am I perfect about how I do that?
There's one element that you're kind of saying it's implied, but I'll actually highlight it. He keeps saying, am I? That's very important to G. With the Xi is, for me, like being a male, I'm like, am I the guy that walks the line perfectly? Mm-hmm. And so, like, if he's scholastically, like Ben's talking about, where like he's saying doing it perfectly, but there's a thrill of like, I'm that guy, or that person. I'm the person that I'm that kind of person. Being that kind of person, whatever that means to a G-Mojo, is very motivating. And like we're doing the Xi, often we're doing that same time. I think it's the same for a demon, it's in a different ratio, but same thing, like my ability to weigh or to be smooth in this kind of situation, particularly it's like challenging, then that means, gee, I'm this kind of person, because that kind of person...
I'm this kind of person that knows these kinds of things, that can master this kind of feat,
Yeah, that's so different though, Jolene, because I know, like for Jai, it's like, that I am, because it's a Jai tower, doesn't change. So like that's not, that's like G. It sounds like y'all are saying that's the person I'm shifting into, or that's the motivation, the that motivation, the shifting into that G person,
Well,
that who I want to be.
Z and G are this way. One's just personal, one's impersonal, but they both define themselves by what they can do. Z and G are action powers, and so the actions you can take, even like some G, can be very heady actions. But the actions you're taking, thoughts or movements, that says who you are. Like, for example, like Naiji, for example, it may not be physical, in their head. It's very important that I know what kind of emotions I'm having when I'm having them. And when I have certain emotions, like, only this kind of person has that kind of emotion. I'm not that kind of person. I make that emotion go away. Other times they're like, I'm a person like that, and that emotion or that place inside is further. But I will swim towards it because I want to be that person, and I only do it if I swim. If I swim where I have to go, then I'm that kind of person.
See, I don't get that, cause for me as a Shy user, I am the
Space you guys
Shy.
can do, which is awesome. It's amazing to me.
Yeah, we have our ourselves.
That's amazing.
I guess one reason that I think that it can be difficult for G users sometimes is because, like, when you get like that bad grade on the test, it feels even more like a personal blow. You know? It's like I just put my motive, like me into this, you know, I in a very personal way, and then you gave me like what, a 40, or you know, say like you fail a test or something, you give me like a 40 on that, like
That's so wild to me, because Jelly, see if this resonates. Like the Z score means I just didn't do enough. I didn't study enough. But it doesn't change the me. It doesn't change the who. It doesn't change the like. I don't.
Right there, effort. The G being a dynamics mover. The effort, as far as what you put it towards and how much you put it towards correctly, that's how we score ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, it's how we define ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, the product that you create is sort of like a representation of your own character.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah. So if you do good, then it's sort of like, yeah, I am the hero. Otherwise, if you do bad, then it's like, what? I've lost my powers.
It's kind of high risk, high reward in a way, because it can feel really good when you do really well, you know, with G, you know, being a G user. But I don't know. I feel like in general, it's a difficult it can be a difficult line to walk, I guess.
Well, I think it's easier if you don't blur the G and Z, in that way, because you can. If you don't do effort, G is very hard on itself. But if you do effort, then if the Z score is not as high as you would like it to be, you could still have some feeling like I'm still the hero. I'm someone who showed up. For G is big. I showed up, I got in the mat, and I tried my hardest to do good. That counts for a lot. So, like sometimes Z will even say that you passed. You can go the other way. But if you like fumbled in that personally you were like weak, or like you knew that was a good performance for you, it's hard to shake that. But on the other hand, if you feel like you did good, Z be like, you can't do that. That's an illegal move. I'm a god.
That's not how it works. Like for Jai users, and Jailene, the Jai is the same. If we get scored badly, we didn't do enough. Like it's very different. Like, y'all are talking about it's so.
It's basically holding space for your motive channel or power versus taking ground. G is a taking ground power, so even in the head or body or the way you live your life, you need to take ground for whatever you consider to be the right thing to take ground for. And if you are doing that, then you're winning. If you are not taking ground for what you think you should be taking ground for, then you're like,
Yeah,
and you have to know, like, you know, you have a sense of.
Real quick, Demas, did you signal that you had something to say?
Yeah, I mean, I guess a handful of comments here and there, but I was going to say that has a lot to do with how some, like the group read that we did before the last one, the week before last, where I think I made a comment where I said that if I'm not authentic to what I'm actually seeing, and I say something else because I feel like that has a higher probability, and I'm wrong, I'm gonna feel like crap for like a week.
Yeah.
Like it's just gonna kill my confidence. But if I'm authentic to what I feel and I'm wrong, I'm at peace with that. Because
Yes.
I know that like I've walked the line and I tried and it just happened to not be enough. That's okay. But at least I went there. You know, I didn't cow to some other like weaker answer because I felt like that would be a shortcut to getting a good score.
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely. Very good point.
Yeah, it's interesting because like when you're mojo reading, you often feel like I think it's different from what it's from what the what you would normally expect.
The probability.
But my accuracy isn't very high, so it's almost like it's more likely that I'm wrong, even though I'm guessing on what I'm seeing.
But I still have faith in me to make.
Yeah, so you have to still
Yeah.
think that, like even though like statistical chance, quote unquote, might say this, you have to go with what you feel, you're actually seeing.
Yeah.
And
So,
this is
Charlene,
polar and tandem. The talk about a G9. That's where the epic swagger comes from. You know what I mean?
see, and I think we have more faith in the system, Charlene. Do you have more faith in the system and the pattern and the score, right? You have.
You're saying if you do it well, it'll pay your Jai dividends. You have
Right. It'll make it'll
Yeah.
confidence in the space that you're holding for your Jai and kind of bolster that. And
Yeah.
that feels like you're moving forward. When you hit those Z marks, you're moving forward.
in your control.
And yeah.
But it's interesting, yeah. Well, this is great. Does anyone else have any more comments? Before we move on, we still have a good time. At least 45 minutes for the other discussion, so we're good. But we should go maybe to the 5-10 minutes. Is there anything
I
else?
feel like we could talk pretty much the entire hangout just this topic. I feel like.
I could keep talking.
There's so much in this.
It's a good time to change it up because it's about halfway. So we're going to go and switch over to the main topic we had planned anyway, which is interpretives and comedy. So just set the scene really quickly. Is that it is the bubble that is the most concentrated in that way. All 16 gender mojos with interpreters are there. Only 2 of the literal gender mojos are, and they are less frequent. There is differences between first wave and second wave in the way they do comedy, but they both are strongly represented. And there's differences in the way the Nai mojos and the Ni mojos do comedy, but also both are strongly represented. Last major thing is there are some differences, I don't think in ability, but as far as finding a niche in what the marketplace allows for their talents, there is differences in the males and females. For example, with the Naiji, is actually they're unusual in that it's the 2 males are more represented than the females. The female Najez less so than the males. With the Romantics, it's actually and with the Genèse, it's the Jaini. Both the female and male Jaini are represented in comedy much more so than either the Jinai, male or female. Then with the Nizez, the male Nizi and female Nizai are there some, but not nearly as much. If you look at how many people are in pop culture that are male Nizi and female Nizai, not a lot of comedians compared to how many there are. If you look at the Nizai male and Nizi female, for how many of them we have, a very large percentage of them are in comedy. And then last here we have the Zinez, same thing. It is actually, in this case, the female Zinai and male Zaini that show up more frequently than the male Zinai and female Zaini. They tend to do other things more often. So interesting enough is that in general, the trend seems to be that obviously all interpreters favor the comedy more than literals, but then within that, any storyline that finds they don't have as many outlets made readily available to them from the tribe or the system or whatever, that comedy is a great outlet in order to kind of get their story out there and say it the way they want to say it. So that's a wonderful thing about it. So with that said, I'll just kind of turn the floor over and we can do whatever we want. Talk about our own personal experiences or just comedians we like, anything and everything.
Well, I was just going to put it out there and maybe get the ball rolling. Is just that it seems like the shiny comedians, they use a lot of self-deprecating humor. That
Yeah.
seems to be a big part of the comedy game for Shiny that's successful. You
Yeah, that's
see, like,
true.
Ella and even the males is sort of
Yeah.
like this, sort of like your fumblings through life are the comedy, or like,
And they kind of take the audience with you.
yeah, and you kind of
That's
take
true.
the audience with.
As part of that, I noticed is the Shiny, actually the Ziny also in their own way. They use that tower tunnel draw as part of the comedy. For the Shiny, it's like, so I go to the god, I'm like, and they do a lot of this kind of thing, and it makes you this feeling pervasive, like, what's going to happen now? What are they?
Pause and sudden. Yeah.
You know, it kind of like sets you up that
Yeah,
it's
kinda like,
the awkward kind of tension is part of the human. That kind of it leaves you in your like awkward tension, and all their jokes kind of bounce you along that note a bit.
yeah.
Yeah, the Jai Tower and then the knee strike. So it's the tower lay with a surprise knee. So like that's how a lot of the Jai comics do it.
Very
Like
effective.
it's all about the surprise knee, but it's the laid back, paused, wait for it, knee strike.
The Ziny do a similar kind of variation of that as well, where it's not like the sort of personal awkward. They do a lot with like socially awkward or things where they kind of like just sort of go, and so this happened to
Right,
this,
yeah.
and then they do the same kind of like the little neat burst there, but it's they often will make you like cringe. That's they
Yeah, like the Jai cringe. I get that a lot. They like to get the Jai cringe a lot from the Ziny comics.
It's very effective. It's delightful because they basically are like, so I had this sandwich, I had my dog, I had some weed. You know what I mean?
And then that's gonna be bad.
We're like, what's the answer gonna be? What's the answer gonna be?
Yeah.
Crazy side.
Very effective. They kind of hold you in this. You know how the towers weigh things? They kind of hold that draw on their voice. It holds you in the weighed position. You stay weighing and then bounce, weigh, bounce, weigh, bounce. It's a really cool rhythm.
Where like for the Nijai, it's more like bounce, 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 surprise feeling. Bounce, 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 surprise feeling. It's the opposite way. Like all the Nijai comics are all like bounce, 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 bounce. Oh, that gives me a big surprise feeling. Like, yeah, like,
like Aziz Ansari.
Wow.
Yeah, Aziz Ansari. He's always sort of like, so I bounced here. So I bounced here. I'm like, whoa, how did I get here? I bounced here. I bounced here. Whoa, how did I get here? That's kind of like.
I love Lucy of like getting to all these like.
Lucy does. Yeah, it's the same thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Bounce.
Totally.
Oh, yes, I'm wrong.
Totally.
Yeah, bounce, bounce, oopsie.
Oh shoot! Yeah, I didn't mean to do that. Or, you know, it's the surprise feeling that comes out of all this. And sometimes it comes out like Nijai do the bull in the china shop too. So like we bounce around and these dozen things happen, and then this thing is the result, and that's the surprise there.
Definitely. I'm curious your thoughts on demons as well, like in the Xeni female, because actually, of the pilots that are interpreted, the Nez pilots, the female Xeni shows up far more frequently than any of the other three.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious your thoughts on their style and why it seems to be more effective, or they use it more in that way.
Let's see. Let me first brainstorm some Xeni comedians just so I have them on the top of my head. So we got Margaret Cho, we got Lisa Lampanelli. Who else?
I was the one that's on another period now.
Oh, her. Yeah, I'm not too familiar with her, unfortunately. Let's see.
There seems to be this thing about that's the way that Xeni women are allowed to control the game in a way that
that's
maybe
true.
They don't get to control the game. Like they control the hecklers, they control the stage, they control the game, the whole game board. They control with and they're your Uther, so.
And also, I think this lady's story may be one that is not as readily validated by the general.
Right. So the Xenai comedians.
You make your own story. If it's funny, that's all the requirement.
Yeah. So a lot of it seems like they're very liberated by comedy. Like they can be more of just what they are, and so like the Xenai ladies, a lot of times they're just really raw and kind of bracing. So like they'll just divulge just super personal stuff. That's like it also has like the shy awkward element, like especially like Margaret Cho, where she'll just like just raw, just super duper naked sexual shit, and then
lay it out.
Yeah. To it kind of just hits you with it. Yeah, I don't.
And I think the comedy for that comes out of being absolutely floored. Like and I'm curious about how that hits your Zai when they just level the playing, like just level it.
How do you respond? You feel with that?
How does that make you feel?
Or at least how does it hit you?
How does it hit you? It doesn't have to be feelings.
They're definitely dropping some artillery. Xenai ladies, when they do comedy, they're dropping some heavy artillery.
They're dropping bombs. Let's see.
That awkward bracingness, that rawness, like does that embolden you? I'm curious.
It kind of does. It kind of does, actually. Well, when you see that, then, well, one, you can't help but like, okay, assuming the material is coming from a good place.
Right.
For instance, Margaret Cho, usually it is. She's a very progressive person. And a lot of times she does like a lot of social commentary and stuff like that, but in a very bracing sort of way.
Yeah, good job.
So I can't help but like respect that, or like it's funny. So it's like you respect the fact that it's funny as well and well done, but at the same time that it's so like raw and putting yourself out there that it's brave at the same time. So
hey Bruno.
Hey Bruno.
Hey guys.
Hey Bruno. So I'm curious, like the fact that you get like a lot of times with the Xenai.
One second.
Sorry.
No, I'll hand it right back to you. Bruno, just to catch you up, we just shipped talk about 15 minutes ago. We are now talking about interpretives in comedy. Go ahead, Starlo.
So when that Z bomb just levels everything and that wave hits you, like how does that go on that? Because like for Jai, it's like, whoa, authentic truth bomb. That's like, for like, but for Zai, I think maybe it's a little different. Like how does that leveling? How does that work for you?
Well, like the feeling that I get from it is often where it's like, okay, I'm noting that it's something that floored everyone, but for me, I just weigh it. I'm like, true though. Like it's flooring, but it's like.
So it's like there's like an admiration for the flooring and the truth.
And also the feeling where it's like I don't feel as floored by it.
Oh, because you don't.
I was going to ask you.
Because in the tower you get to stay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
Because it automatically imagines things like, say, Xenai and Shiny, you automatically, in a way, sort of know a bit of your power and your place in like an exchanges person. Most people cannot handle that force forward. But you feel like oh, other people seem to be kind of wilting a bit.
Yeah.
After that, but I don't actually. I feel okay. I feel good.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm like nodding along.
That's actually a game.
Yeah.
That's a game of Zenez banter, actually, where like Z and I will kind of like start taking the conversation really far, and Ziny will just roll with it. It's like, this is getting really personal, but whatever. I can keep going with this.
My principal understanding, it works everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's not, because y'all aren't relative at all. Like when the Z bomb hits for Nijai, it's like we're dancing on that truth, and like that's an exciting thing because we get to dance on it. But like for Ziny, I think maybe there's this element of, oh yeah, I kind of already knew that, but it's cool that she laid that out.
Mm-hmm.
But the Xi Alpha doesn't have to dance. They actually can just sit and enjoy the
Yeah.
Right.
They kind of soak it in. Just soak it. I think everyone else has to kind of give way to it or try to move around or back off from it. But for the Z can just take it and just let it either wash over or just resonate. Either way is fine.
Because right, there's a resonation that comes out of that when it's a truth that you recognize that you always kind of knew in the back of your head as a Zine, like yeah, that's true, and I knew that. Like,
Yeah,
do you get that?
I think
truth
dance
is a big deal for them because articulation is polar. So to hear truth stated boldly out loud is
big deal.
Yeah.
Well, I think the dancing is the difference between whether you wilt, whether you fold, or whether you stand and just go with it, or like I'm gonna stay with you with this, you know, because like when there's that initial push, then there's the unflapping of of is it okay for me to just, is it okay for me, like, is this, am I good? Like, I've just been hit with something, am I okay? And then there's the knee of, where you, the knee, I guess, open-mindedness or openness to, like, they just took this to this level, all right, I think I can roll with that, I'm gonna go with that too. So, you know, there's the Zive kind of, like, rolling it off, but also the knee of, like, I guess I can dance to this beat, you know?
Yes, I can sway to this beat.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I was curious about something like for example, Jinai are not so big in comedy as like Zhani and other mojos. I was wondering why that was. I was thinking just crazy off the wall, but like first thoughts, does it have anything to do with the fact that comedy is sometimes a way to get over awkward feelings or anxieties, and the Jinai are more like well
That's
adapted
the point.
in the social dynamic.
It includes a lot of self-abasement.
Social skills.
Like, it includes a lot of laughing at yourself. Like, being really good at comedy requires
Not
that you be really
necessarily,
good
though, Bruno.
Well,
No.
I mean, a lot of the top comics do that. Like Robin Williams, like, he laughs at himself like crazy. Like,
Most goblins do. That's true.
yeah,
Well-
and so being the butt of the joke, like laughing at yourself, being self-deprecating, that in many ways goes against the Jinai credo of like sort of being like the leader and, you know, propping yourself up.
But I actually I've seen a lot of Jinai who actually have very good sense of humor, are known for this, such as Matt Damon,
Jon
George
Stewart. Yeah.
Absolutely, but they don't often, even when Matt Damon's a janitor, like in Good Will Hunting, he's a genius janitor. He's like the most brilliant guy on earth.
Right, but we're talking about humor. I've seen Matt Damon on interviews, and when he tells stories of like him meeting famous stars and so forth, he makes fun of their like eccentricities as humans, but he almost always also makes fun of his. So
Yeah,
he
and like
self-deprecating. One thing I would think is perhaps it comes out in a different way that might not be classified, because I think what they were doing naturally here, without realizing it, when we say comedy, we're probably naturally thinking stand-up or sitcom, sketch comedy. But like Jinai, for example, they do a lot of movies where, like, for example, romantic comedies. There's, you know, the Jinai are quite represented.
Yeah, that is true. Like, kind of
the rom-coms
kind of
they're really
comedy
good
they
at.
like to do might just be different, you know?
Yeah, because I wonder if it's not so much self-deprecating as it is just kind of being humble. Because a lot of times Jon Stewart will present himself as if he's less of a big deal than he actually is,
Right.
which kind of seems like it's self-deprecating, but he's also kind of. But actually, I interpret it more like humbling himself.
Yeah, it's exactly. I think you hit it right on the nail. Like the Sheens, Martin Sheen and Charlie Sheen. When Martin Sheen tells the stories, he tells the story in a I'm not a swaggering, I'm humble, and this is authentically a funny story. Charlie does a little bit of the same thing where he tries, like, he makes fun of being such a stud, or, you know, like it's not the same sort of classically self-deprecating. And I think for Jinai, they're the jovial host kind of comedian. They're the ones that are always that always have the everybody's listening to them in the bar, like because I have the background of in my 20s being bartender, and like there's a lot of G&I bartenders, and they always tell the stories that get the whole bar laughing, but it's not.
Yeah, that's what I think of a lot. Like,
yeah, but it's not a self-deprecating sort of thing at all.
So then the question that becomes, it seems like the Nye and the Ni just give those abilities in general. Just like, for example, I know a lot of the Z-Nye politicians, CEOs, they're known for being very funny, very engaging. They are great at conversation. So I think actually, again, it probably still comes out, but they don't feel the need or want to necessarily do it in stand-up or other things. One thing I might be thinking there is a correlation is on the pilots, because we did notice that it's the 2G9 and the Z9 male. But the Z9 females have no problem being very funny, and I've seen Z9 journalists like Jink Uger. He's funny. You know, he's a funny guy. So, but I don't think maybe pilots. This might be what Bruno was talking about. Maybe there's going back to Bruno was saying. I don't say necessarily like swagger, but perhaps they are concerned about how this is going to be perceived as far as their presentation.
Well, I think male pilots.
Real quick, just I think going along with what Bruno was saying, I think there is possibly self-deprecation, but I think it might be a bit larger than that, but does include that. I think pilots, they enact roles. And one thing being comedian, besides self-deprecating, it's really bigger, which is you have to sometimes pretend to be other things and then mock that thing you're pretending to be. And I think perhaps pilots maybe a bit like, when I step off stage, would that still be with me? Do you know what I mean? Because like Matt Damon, he's funny and very self-deprecating, but he's always Matt Damon.
Yeah.
That is a difference I noticed. You know what I mean? Jake Uger, he's very funny. And he's self-deprecating too sometimes a lot, but he's always Jink Uger.
But doesn't Jon Stewart like get into character to mock in order to
for sure,
mock the character?
for sure. But he's an unusual case.
Okay.
Amongst the amount of G9 we know that have good sense of humor, there's quite a lot that have a good sense of humor, but only like one we can think of it. It's
Although
like
Trevor Noah isn't the new guy.
That's true.
Also
But
Jon Stewart is using the mocking to mock something that he thinks of as a bad code of conduct. So he shifts into that thing so that he can mock the thing that he despises, and that's how he uses that. So like I think G9, like my father being Naji.
And Noah Trevor's are less common.
Yeah. But
how many G9 had good sense of humor?
Like my father being a Naji, he's okay. So he was that ultimate salesman, right? So that Kensei salesman. But what he did, I think pilots do this often too, because my father had extremely good G and rapport building and all that. I think that pilots use that humor as a tool, rather like much more as a way to shift the dynamics, this is my tool to get my buff. Like I get my buff points because I'm using this tool to make everybody think I'm the good guy. I'm the good old boy. I'm the one that's
the Nez power being used to get a dynamics mover flag forward, whereas basically the other mojos may see it more as the end of itself.
Right. Right.
Yeah. What's interesting though is G-Bai comedians. Like, I kind of wonder how other mojos are like this with the relationship to making people laugh, but I was watching Aisha Tyler once talk about her comedy, and she was talking about just like the value, like how rewarding it is to make people laugh, and that's something like I relate to, like even though I'm not a comedian or going in that direction, but I related to her on this where she was saying that she could just be at a Starbucks or something, and if she makes the barista laugh, she'll be like, yes, I made you laugh. I made you laugh. And it's like, that just makes her day, yeah. Yeah.
That's the piece for the pilots. Like that's how comedy is the tool, whereas I think for Nye and Ni Alpha or even Ziny, it's like it's not the tool, it's
Well, I know for Nez Alpha, it's actually going to just be, it feels good to do it because your brain moves quickly and combines things in unusual ways, and that feels good and makes you feel smart and interesting.
Like you said, an end to itself.
I think the towers, there's going to be, it's just fun. It's fun to go through life, and you got your tower, and you had these little bumps and everything, and you kind of like, aha, that happened. You just make light of it and make connections to the experiences to make it interesting and tapestry.
I think it's built into creating a more interesting environment maybe for NES alphas than it is for pilots, where it seems like it's definitely used as a tool for creating buff points.
Well, it's not just buff points. I think the humor also will change. For example, I know, the NES pilots, both Ginai and Zenai, that have more of a comedy bent. It does influence what they consider to be the dynamics they want to have. It does expand that and change exactly how they define it.
Right.
Because like the case of but I know what you're saying though. I mean, obviously for pilots, they're the most motivated by flags forward, so all their powers are geared towards that happening.
Right. Right.
It is. Yeah, I mean, it is in a way inherently limiting, because if you look at like Nijai, especially Nijai females that do comedy, compared to movies, they're a lot more of a specific type. They're a lot more like the Lady Gaga, Cyndi Lauper, like a little bit quirky and weird.
Yeah, we play they play on that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm thinking of Kristen Schaal. What's her name? Vanessa Bayer. They do this like really weird, goofy, like over the top version of Nijai.
Yeah.
And there isn't a lot of room for. What's that?
I think that's another piece of it. That's the place where they get to be over the top without being dinged for it.
Right. Talking about like what is classically defined as a comedian, because again, I would sort of say relate like the Ginais. You see a lot of movies. The Nijai, definitely the females, for example, are often put in romantic comedies.
Yeah.
And so if you open up what is comedian to a person who has great comedic timing and so forth in like a romantic comedy, there's a wide range of Nijai riffs that do that. You're right, bro. The range of riffs that do stand-up or sketch comedy is quite limited. But if you expand to like, say romantic comedy, things like that, then the riffs get.
And I think that's why so many of the rom-coms have the Nijai and the Ginai, because I know that dynamic at the bar. It was almost all Nijai and Naiji males. So it was Nijai females and Jai. At least that I strongly suspect, based on I'm not an expert master mojo reader. So, but my strong suspicion is lots of Nijai women at bartenders and Ginai men. So we play to the public stage. So we would throw jabs back and forth and out to the bar audience, and that whole timing thing.
It's closely associated. The Nijai are also Abrams. It's not going to have the pilot focus like Bruno was saying, getting flagged forward, but there is, I would say, a shared thing with Abrams, with their humor of being likable.
Right.
Sometimes humor can be used to, like Daiji used humor a lot to like make people nervous. So humor can have all kinds of goals to it.
Right.
The Abrams making themselves more likable, or seen as a good person, or having engendering a good time. That's rewarding. I think very rewarding for their thing. And as Dean was saying, I think Jiva, I think probably any of the objective values-based mojos are going to be pleased that they can use humor to make themselves more likable and make the environment happier. People are happier.
Yeah, it's that likability. Yeah.
I'm curious about like a strain of Vizai comedians that I saw in the Rosetta Stone. That seems to be one of the few prominent literal strains.
Yeah, the Vizai, and specifically it's the Vizai male and the Jivai female. It's very, very kind of focused on those two. Mm-hmm. And the humor they have is quite similar. Very distinct. I'll say one thing too is that going on what you were saying, Bruno. Like if you look at the Nijai, males and females, there's quite a range of comedic riffs. If you incorporate, comedic things like movies, not just stand-up. But with the Jivai, I don't think Demas follows them a lot. There's a general sassy. Sassy is like the almost all of them have that. And then the Vizai dudes, it's like making fun of how much they're into visceral enjoyment and how much the rest of the world worries about big stuff while I enjoy, Twinkies.
Yeah, it's for the Vizai. Yeah, it's that sensual like exhilaration on the inhaling of just sensation, and it's like the over the top piece of that, and the same thing on the G Vi piece. It's the fact that they get to be that sassy flags forward, maybe in a way that they don't get to be when they're not in control of the stage.
Being over the top sassy seems to be very pleasing to them.
Yeah,
there's a as far as riffs goes, but the riff of delivery. If you look at the Nizai, like say Nizai males, there are so many ways they do that.
Right.
But if you look at like say Jivi female or Vizai males, there's like a more of a homogeny in kind of like their content and how they deliver it. For example, Vizai dudes, if you tell me the person's a Vizai male comedian, okay, if I was to bet on 100 of those, I would make a lot of money if I bet every time they're gonna be overweight. It's just true.
Yeah, because
like about like 85%, maybe more, are obese. It's weird. I mean.
But it's the inhaling of the sensualism. Like that's where that comedy comes from. The overindulgence.
Overindulging is almost always a theme, and
Because
it
they're
kind
shtick.
of sells it. It's funnier
Yeah, that's true.
that you're heavier.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about like. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just thinking the Frank Caliendo. He's a
Right.
Vizai comedian that he cracks me up so bad. his impressions. It seems like he's got like a real fetish going on with his Nai and his G. Like really
Actually-
in a way, he sort of like tries to like pretend to be like Al Pacino, for example, but he's like a Vizai version of Al Pacino, like overweight. And he'll and the thing that he'll do is he'll attach like to certain quirks that Al Pacino has, and he'll keep hitting on those beats. But he does it in a way that's really appealing and amusing, and it just like it cracks me up. The voices, I just love all of that sort of stuff. It's just fun.
The whole pattern is over. It's like bigger. Like it's the comedy comes out of making the V as big as you possibly can make it. That's where the comedy comes out of for the Vizai. It's like make the V even bigger.
The thing is, the interesting on that is that how much is it them feeling that's the route for them versus what the environment may want? Because I'm curious, is like I've seen lots of Vizai athlete dudes, for example, and if you listen to them, a lot of them are funny. I mean, a lot of Vizai football player and basketball players, they're witty. I mean, they trash talk a lot. As a part of that, they're quick. They're quick and they're funny, and they can banter really well with the interviewers and so forth. I'm like, but they either don't have an interest in doing stand-up, or people are like, I don't want to see him.
Well, they can make more money doing
big.
the sports.
The athletics, they have that natural outlet, and the funny is again the like for Vizai that are not as athletically inclined, and they're maybe a little physically awkward or whatever. Maybe that comes out in a way that. Okay, so if I make the V bigger, then I get to be the class clown, and I get to get props that way.
That's right. I think it has to do with like quote unquote sanctioned routes for certain types of people and types of mojas and etc. Like like an interesting thing that I noticed in the Rosetta Stone is that if you look back like to the 30s, 40s, 50s, like most of the African Americans are Nijai males. Of the males, at least, are Nijai. In many ways, because it's less threatening, I think.
Yeah.
Like in comedy.
That's a very good
comedy. In comedy, for example, and so
because there's a whole thing of angry black
right.
person.
There's certain types of routes that people of a group, like if we say take a group like African American, then certain ones of that group are going to have an easier time, like challenging the status quo and being subversive, without being openly challenging, like the Naiji would. The Naiji, like a Naiji African male in the 40s and the 50s would have been way too threatening. Like many of the blues guys, for example, never really broke out into like any sort of mainstream success because of that. Whereas a lot of the jazz guys had more of a sophisticated Nijai type of riff, type of Nijai riff, like Cab Calloway, Louis Armstrong.
They tend to be more palatable to like for people like. They're okay. It's different, but they're okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a way to subvert the status quo because I don't think a directive can is easily take that step back and not naturally put those boundaries, whereas a Nijai is in those kind of spaces still can be subversive without triggering the firewall.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, and so maybe the Vzi have a little something similar going on with that, because V is naturally going to be threatening to Nai-G and Nai Alpha in general, Nai users, because it just reminds it so much of yourself. You know, like there's that that whole thing about looking into the mirror and being challenged by whatever you're looking at, which is an essential part of any sort of threat, is feeling threatened by what you see of yourself in someone else. And so,
well, they're either that or their ability to lessen you or be alien. Alien is also something. It is always a reflection of you, but sometimes a reflection of what you see in them, or the fact that you don't see yourself in them with a story. You're like, oh, I'm not represented. I don't see myself in them, so I don't like it.
right, and so the Vizai thing, that whole riff is one that may be less threatening in both of those ways to Nijaz audiences, for example, or just romantics in general that or interprets whoever's the audience for comedy.
That's interesting. I obviously think interprets probably a higher taste in it, but comedy is one of the larger kind of like type O commodities. The marketplace tends to like music, regardless of who's doing it. If it's good music, acting, comedy. Most of IG listen to music that's popular music. You know what I mean? Even though they don't necessarily make it.
Yeah.
They still. But if you look at IZ, if you listen to IZ coming out in sporting events, they're playing popular music that are by mojos that they are not. So I do think it applies. I think in some areas more than others, but comedy, one of the magic things about it is the ability to be so different than your audience, but still make that connection. A lot of comedians talk about that, how growing up they were very awkward, and it was hard to make a connection because of being out of place or being weird growing up, and the humor allowed them to finally be able to be like connect with people they couldn't do otherwise. It's a great connector of what you think could not be connected.
And also back to that subversive sort of thing, like even like in the older comedians, Jackie Gleason was a way to be subversive about working class men having power, and yet not really trigger that firewall against the people that controlled the money, the advertisers, and not. He didn't really trigger that firewall, but he could be really subversive and push the envelope on how much power working class people ought to have. So like there's that whole piece of it. Comedy's always been a subversive sort of push at the status quo.
Yeah, get you to talk about issues that are like uncomfortable or not palatable by a certain segment of the population, but it kind of like slips it in there into the.
What I think is interesting is that, okay, we already talked about how like Cenk Uyghur's funny, but he chose to be a journalist.
Right.
Then you have comedians who are like Bill Maher and George Carlin. All they want to talk about is politics. They could have been journalists, but no, they chose to actually package what they want to say in comedy.
Good point.
I think that's interesting because like every now and then it flips where you have like Abby Martin, who's a Nazi in journalism. Then like Ann Coulter, who she's not really a journalist, but she's political. And interestingly enough, she hangs out with a bunch of comedians too. So
that's interesting. I wonder if the same thing of like having the Nazi who are interested in politics but go the comedy route. Does it have to do with the independence of mind or the need to be to still have?
That makes sense.
I think
that makes a lot of sense too. Yeah.
I want to say so. If you observe it and it's true,
I can say it.
I can just say it, regardless of whether my network approves that to be.
Yeah, see, like that was George Carlin's whole thing was he started out as a straight guy. He started out as a straight radio commentator and he couldn't say the things that his nigh presence wanted to say straight up front going the straight route. So he said, well, you know, I can get all this stuff in, and I can say exactly what I want to say, and I don't have to compromise anything to do it this way. So that was his whole, like, that was his travel, that was his journey.
Makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I know for that, obviously the Nye versus the Ni in general, probably some of the mojos, but I think in general, the Nye is going to want to be able to say what it wants to say, and the power to do that is the juice. Where I think with Ni, it's the ability to connect and to gather these opportunities the humor gives to you. And it doesn't have to be particular opportunities, just better often opportunities. Ni's more relativistic that way. We're not like I want a certain thing, and then what way can I do that? The world will have to let me do it.
Because for me, it's more about more. I'll dig through it later. More. I'll dig through it later. Bye. More. Let me dig through that later.
Yep, Nye, though, kind of pumps them inside. You have things you see and want to say, and then it doesn't matter what you're doing, who you're talking to, that will just come out. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's just so then humor can be a way of like, this would be weird to put out unless I made it funny.
Yeah. It's interesting how you also have like Robert Anton Wilson, Nizai, who's considered a philosopher, writer, maybe even you can consider him a kind of mystic, but he considered himself as a kind of comedian, and when he would do lectures, then he was very stand-up comedy style, and he was really funny. And he also gave in one of the lectures I saw, gave props to George Carlin in the way that George Carlin kind of like climbed to a certain level of power to where he's allowed to just say what he wants to say, and no matter how subversive it is, and no one can do anything about it.
George Carlin.
Right, and see, I think that was his world vision goal. George Carlin was like, I need a way to be able to say exactly what I want to say without anybody being able to talk back, and like that was his worldview goal. And, you know, he decided comedy was the way to get there.
Sure.
Yeah. It's a way to just speak truth.
And when you speak that kind of truth.
But going off what Adema said, also is that humor has several really powerful and unique abilities. One is to be able to say whatever you want to say, where normally situationally, either it's oppressive to that, or it doesn't seem like there's a connection to do that. It'll just get us in there and make a connection. That's what we're talking about. But two other very important powers are, one is dealing with adversity.
Yeah.
The ability to keep a sense of humor during rough times is huge in being able to keep going in a good state. And another thing that's kind of related to that, and going with a theme thing like Rob Anton Wilson, is you'll find a lot of people who are very heady that you think, oh, they're very intellectual, they might not have a sense of humor. Actually, I think to be really smart and like what I consider like a real genius way, you have to have a mind that can move in ways that maybe others cannot, and humor seems to engender that. A lot of people that are like, you know, kind of minds that can make connections that others cannot, they may use it in science or in philosophy, but it's simply a way of looking at things, to note the absurd, to note the incongruent, to connect things in ways you didn't think they'd be connected. That is such a good way to think. You know what I mean? Like I've heard this often because of that in the arts. Pretty much everyone says this. It is way easier to go from comedy to drama. All that sounds counterintuitive because you're crying and whatnot, but it is. Rather than going from drama to comedy, and that's because humor is about a gazillion things happening at once, and you're noting stuff and connecting them for people in ways they wouldn't do in their literally you're making connections other humans, hopefully every human in the audience didn't make. And because you connect and they didn't, you give them all a little thing like that. So it's it makes you have a different kind of mind.
Science, there's studies that prove that humor actually makes your brain faster.
Oh, for sure.
So, like,
I know growing up on the streets, and these guys that I had learned, they were rough, and they did things specifically to show strength. And one of the quickest things they did was use humor. In fact, if you were unable to do it, it was a sign. You're slow. I'm going to be all over you. Because there's two kinds of speed. There's like just general stuff, like the speed of making connections. There's also you personally. To change character, to change mood. In comedy, you have to like move yourself like an instrument into all kinds of moods and headspaces. And if you can do that, and another person can't, they're kind of clumsy and slow compared to you. Not just like being funny, but moving their energy. Like.
And how fast can you come back with a comeback? Like humor trains you to be like if you don't have knee as your first power, humor trains you to be boom 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 boom, and nothing. I mean, like I think of it like knee dancing. Like there's very little that can knock me off my feet. I can always roll with that. But and even in comedians that aren't knee alpha, they have that quickness, that presence of mind to jump at the next thing.
It's almost subconscious, almost like humans are programmed, and if they see somebody who's bigger than them, to like feel, be on guard.
Right.
It's just like part of the human programming. I think if you see somebody who's humorous and able to laugh things off, subconsciously that whatever you throw at them, they're just gonna laugh it off and shrug it off. So that puts them in a position of strength.
It does. Yes, that's a good point, made, Bruno. When you see someone has a good sense of humor, generally denotes two things you mentioned. One, they're going to be able to generate things or follow up with things faster than a person who doesn't have that. But also something else, a vigor. There's a vigor to their spirit that humor gives them, a resiliency to stuff.
And also a danger, because it's also they can turn that on, whomever.
Because like a Naiji that has that quick, because Nai is fast, but to keep up with the knee like that piece of it, that firing stuff back and forth, that's like.
Well, it depends on how you go about it. Both the knee and the nai actually are equally fast in humor. If you watch them actually exchange, they just do it different ways. They have different advantages. The advantage of the knee is innately faster in how it moves with new information. So going with the flow of what the other actors or players are doing or what the environment's doing, they can often bring that in and juggle it into what they're doing. But what Nai does is it actually has a host of characters in your head. And as many characters as you've created prior to that evening, you can bust them all out in bullet time, and as fast as you can shift your Rolodex. I don't think I've ever seen anyone outspeed a Nai Alpha. If you can point that happening on a regular basis, I'll be surprised. In general, Nai Alpha generally don't get outspeeded in the way you're talking about, because there's a difference between processing new information and shifting comedically.
And the superpolar vibe really plays into that. Like if you're really peaking really strongly, the superpolar vibe is always going to have something ready for you in a given area. Outside of your area of expertise, it's going to be really difficult to do that. But in your area of expertise, you're going to be able to pull out things faster and better, and with more assurance than anyone else in that
Right,
field.
because the difference of shifting is between, are you shifting related to being pinged? Chani does it. You take some of the environment, you bring it in yourself, and you morph off of it. With Nai, it's a question of a pantheon of characters. How many do you have, and how often do you go through your deck of cards? Because that's basically what you do as far as speed. When Nai does speed, that's if you see, like, say, Jake Uger like debating, I've yet to see him be outspeeded in an argument. But that's because unless it goes out, this is where they can trip each other. If it goes outside of what one of his characters can do, then he'll have to pause, and then he'll be slow. But I've seen Nii get stumped as well. If you actually make it to where they, because Nai, for example, will say things that will make the Nii miss a beat in the environment, and they'll trip. They can get tripped that way. So I know Nii can be tripped by Nai, and Nai can be stumped. It's kind of how it works. So because one's the outer power, like active, the Nii kind of like dancing, and all of a sudden, like, it will lose its footing. Nai will be like shifting in characters, and then somehow it'll get a glitch. You mean like, boot up character 3, character 3, character 3.
I don't know.
Come on, where's my character 3?
So there's this thing in this New Jazz banter that's a big, like, for me it's an intrinsic part of comedy, and that, okay, so me, we're always bouncing on that. Okay, so like we're always bouncing on that nigh beat, like we pounce on that nigh beat. But if the beat doesn't come in, like if they do that that they make an irregular pattern, we don't always catch the irregular pattern. We're looking in the other direction. So like that's the thing that Nai does. But the thing that's really cool to me about Naiji is, other than other Ni Alpha and like sisters and cousins and stuff that we're all Nijai, when we're all riffing, like reacting, resonating, firing back and forth. But when I get into that banter with a Naiji, they're actually predicting 3 steps ahead. They know where the conversation is going. So like they're ready for it, not because they're thinking it in real time, but because they've already correctly predicted where the conversation's going.
Right. We read a motif and then see what character would fit and try to get ahead of the curve.
Exactly.
But it doesn't always work, obviously. But I don't want to keep it too much in thinking of just sort of like any of the particular storylines, because the humor is mainly about like I said, the Nez powers in general. So there's certain kind of things that they just have for anyone who develops those powers. One of them, we talked about some of the 3 main things before, like vigor, being fearless, connecting things you wouldn't normally connect, and making space for yourself when you normally wouldn't have one made for you. But another really cool thing is, I would say, there's a high. There's a real high if you are doing either Ni or Nai. And it can be Nai to Nai, Ni to Ni, or Nai to Ni. It doesn't matter. But it goes back with like it's an elevated headspace when you have normal ways of doing it, and now you add these interesting connections, and they go, ooh, and the other person takes it and adds a connection. Yeah, and then you add a connection. So it doesn't have to be like being kind of competitive. This is like a thrill of it. Why comedians often like talking to each other, because it's like, how long can you keep this up? And as long as you're doing that, you're like sharing this intangible special headspace that only exists because you're making these connections, and the other person can register it. And it's really like, wow, as far as like me, like you see me, you hear me, you are following me. Humor really lets you know, because most people won't be able to do it. Only the ones who are able to be with you, they'll keep chiming in and adding to what you're doing.
That's why ones like Key and Peele are so like magical, because they like get their headspace at all moments. They can just keep like improving, shifting, and
they feed each other.
Yeah, they feed each other.
Like one bounces, and then one bounces it back, and it's just bounce, 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 and you can see they get giddy in that they enjoy, like I said, that they can make a way for themselves in the world, and they might be like classical leading men. They also like they can make the audience like them, so forth. But they also see it. I think they're very good friends, obviously. There's this like you and me, man. Like you almost feel like we're leaving everyone behind. It's just you and I in this little humor volley. And actually, I'm like, you go, guys.
Oh, yeah.
The same thing happens in jazz music. It's that same playoff. It's because I think maybe Ademus can talk a little bit about how that works in music, how you play off of the idea or the pattern of this other thing and juggle
humor
that.
Doesn't have to be just making jokes. It can just be looking at life interestingly.
Yeah.
If you look at more interesting, I'm sure like the notes, humor allows you to do things, to try things that maybe wouldn't be readily apparent. That's got to be relevant composing, I would think. Sure.
Let's see. Okay, if you guys want me to talk about improvisation and music, I didn't really study jazz, so unfortunately, I'm not really much of an authority on this.
I even hear it in your electric music too.
No, but I think for me personally, I would be more interested in however you want to do it, Ademus, is simply how the humor kind of works for you in general, but like particularly like say flowing with your other.
Yeah, there was.
Can you clarify what you're asking? Like, I'm not sure how to answer this.
We're talking a lot here about how they go back and forth. We mentioned sort of the Nez and the Zez, also some other things. I'll make sure that we talk a bit also about the Zenez as far as like how humor is used between the two of them. One obviously has Ni and the other has Na, as it always is in the parent.
1 second.
Personally, I'd be interested in having a Zenai here because there's a lot of Zaini comedians. I'm curious how they interpret it. Obviously, they hook up a lot, so clearly they must find it appealing. I was curious, like how they find that appealing. Like for example, in my head, I'm aware if Nexi or Serena met up spirit forms are associated with my other, if they think something I did was witty or interesting, I kind of feel they're like, hee hee. They kind of like they like it. Do you get that from your other as well, like appreciation of your humor?
Yeah. I mean, there's the same kind of appreciation that you did something clever, or yeah, I clever in a smart humor kind of way.
Definitely.
They're
Mhm.
directed. I feel like the directive others, like for myself, that would be an IG, with the G9 and an IZ as well. They're less focused. Like I find myself doing a lot of things. Like I don't relate to that character as like as like funny or giggly or even happy particularly. I see it almost like more sacred, spiritual, both light and heavy. Like a lot of other, I would use a lot of other terms, not necessarily giggly or happy or those kinds of
No,
things.
no, for Nye, it's not giggly. It will be this though. There is bemused. If I was to say something that seems to go with all the Nye mojos, it's bemused. If you watch them, they're making a joke. They enjoy the fact that they're seeing what others don't. In fact, one thing Nye does to Nia a lot is there's a pattern happening, and then Nye will say, "See that? Yeah. You know why that happens? Why? Because so and so sleep with so and no one knows that. And so when she comes,
We love
Yeah, that
that.
is cool.
they'll kind of just point that out,
That's
and
a good one.
Nye, I would say you're right, bro. They don't really get giddy, but they do get kind of bemused of like, yep, that's how life works.
And we
Yeah.
love that when y'all tie it in a bow.
But that's the reaction that I try to get when like when I try to do something funny or in my music work where I try to do something that you know basically satisfies those requirements. Like so those that's basically what I'm saying. Like those are the requirements I work with, rather than making her laugh so much. It's more about like making myself laugh in a way, or feel sad, feel joy, all these things in a way that to her seems like spiritual. Uh, like I look at, like it's funny that you mentioned Key and Peele, like because they're both Nizai, right? And they both do very over the top comedy, but I can almost picture like their other being a very like I think Key is dating Chelsea Peretti, right? Who's Nizy.
Oh, interesting. I know that makes
Yeah,
sense.
they're dating. And she strikes me as like the much more serious, like this very like serious, heavy type of Nizy.
Have you seen Brooklyn Nine-Nine? She's
No, I have. No, I know she's.
And she's off the wall
zany.
and zany.
But she.
No,
but the big difference is Nye, because I laugh like this, I get giddy, but Nye thinks that when things get gnarly, that's funny.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big difference between me and Nye.
Chaos. Like,
I don't think chaos, but like every human, every system has a wig out pressure point. Nye likes to note it, and if they can push that pressure point, or they know it's going to get tripped, they're like, wait for it, wait for it. That student is going to bring that teacher an apple. That teacher does not like being given apples. Wait for it, and then gives the apple, slaps the apple out of the hand, and that's funny. That's funny. I'll do that. Almost all Nye mojo, Jink Uger, all Nye mojo, like, you know what's going to happen? But this is like Nye uses this phrase a lot. Mark my words. Mark my words. They'll say something.
And that's one of those things like Nisha absolutely delight in that.
Especially
in
if
that
it seems like
prediction.
really absurd, like it seems like something that's totally off the wall, but like it's gonna happen. That's like perfect.
But Nisha delight in that correct prediction, because the correct prediction is also rewarding and funny. Because I was just gonna say this though, Adimus, like your music has that. It has that clever like. So like difference between Bruno's stuff and your stuff. Like Bruno's stuff makes me like feel the bigger jai like in out of his music. Your stuff, Adimus, makes me. That's like there's this clever pattern to it that like really delight. Do you know what I mean? Like there's something in that for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering how that relates to what you're trying to do, because I get the Nijaz. I'm trying to relate that to how that pattern works for you because I think it works similarly in music as it does for humor. I think the two are really wrapped up and connected. So like how does that match with what you're going for when your Uther is that's the ultimate like purveyor of what's good, right?
Mm-hmm.
Have you known many Xenai in real life? As an addition to that question, because I haven't like personally been close to many Naiji, but I've had like sort of like these kind of weird things where it's just like, you know, there's like a huge distance, but it's also like magnetic. So like
Right.
I actually.
No, I get what you're saying. Okay, to answer your question, no, I actually don't really know Anaizi. For the most part, like my interests and like academic following and professional following has put me in environments where there are more Nez Alpha and specifically Nujez than Zenez, and that's kind of starting to change in my professional life. But for the most part, I would really just see Zenai from afar, like personalities that I'm interested in, people that I'm interested in who are Zenai. But what you were saying before, the magnetism, that's still something I feel close to, that I still have. That's just a part of me. And the media influences that I intake, that feeds into that connection. So now trying to kind of weave that into addressing what Starglow was talking about.
This is great, guys. Thank you.
Let me see. To review, Starglow, you were talking about, I guess, the process of, doing music and how it kind of feeds into connection with my other, and
yeah, because it has to do with the like Nisha, like Bruno stuff has to do with more of the waves of feeling that comes off of music, where yours has to do with like the patterns of connectivity, and it's the patterns and the cleverness of those patterns. Like
Bruno already said that. I think that was your wording, and so I don't know exactly how Bruno or Demas specialize.
Yeah, I'm conflating.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Let's see. It starts off with kind of just my own standards of what I'm trying to express that's genuinely mine. And there's a number of different ways that I approach it. Like, on some level, sometimes I like to make music that's just really precise and just has, like, really intricate, like, precise beats or melodies or something like that that are unique, not heard a lot, and have put a lot of work into it.
Yeah.
A lot of kind of just not so much layering, because not stacking things on top of each other, but crunching, I guess. A lot of just processing time of me just doing something. So there's a lot to it, a lot to unfold. But then there's also, I feel equally important is the jazz, which is what I determine as like acceptable music, meaning this is worth finishing, this is worth putting effort into, as opposed to this was fun playing around, but I'm going to put this aside and probably never open this again. With the difference is how it moves me, how I'm impacted by it. So when I kind of have like this aha music, like I was saying before, when I found something that I know is going to get a score, I'm moved by it in a certain way. Like, I'm moved by my own work. And a part of that being moved by it is, okay, so what I was talking about before when I was saying that I like to have an idea of what how the Z scores, what the Z likes. And there's a spirit-forming element to that, which is I kind of carry the spirit of a crowd with me, meaning a crowd of kind of just people.
Right.
Yeah. And from being around people, going to shows and stuff like that, then I'm always kind of watching how they're moved, how like the force, the magic, the spell of music, like what it's actually doing to them. And that's just something that spirit kind of just gets absorbed into me, and I carry it around. And so when I'm in the studio making my own music, I can feel the spirit of that crowd moving or dancing or like being affected by it. So that is the dialogue that I have with my other, where that spirit of the crowd, in this case, that is my other.
Yes, so like I can see, like I watch, it's almost like I watch the Ni and Z of that, which like so I'm imagining that being your other, like that's the piece that really appeals to me. The new pattern, the clever way that goes together, and the Z of it moving, the dynamics, like that's what I'm. So it's curious to me that that's how you carry that spirit form almost with you to do your music.
That is awesome. Yeah, I mean, I've tried to think of it in those terms. Um, for whatever reason, it just doesn't work. Like maybe because I'm not I can't handle those kind of situations as well as you can maybe. But yeah, that's fascinating that you think of it as like a crowd. Your other as like the sort of like at the head. I would think, sort of telling you what the crowd is doing, sort of feeding you, funneling that information, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But for yours, Bruno, I think it more has to do with you're playing to that like the for yours the music just it's a wave of washover.
It's very before we start, we talk about artists and how they work. You don't say how their process works.
I'm sorry.
It's okay to say how it affects you. Like this is what I get out of it, but
yeah,
it's okay. Yeah, I understood what you meant.
Yeah, I meant that as completely personal, not as a off-putting on you. So sorry about that. Right. But it's that what I feel is that wave, and I would think that has more to do with the whole wash of the G, because G to me, like, is the wash of the sun coming out. So like that's
my other I rarely think of her as like a crowd, or I mean I've tried to think of the crowd thing. I've actually done that kind of experiment where like I'll have like a video of a crowd playing while I'm listening, and I try to get that image into my head, but it's just not naturally what I go for. My other what I actually do is I keep a picture of a Naiji, sometimes a Naizi or a Jinai or something, but most often a Naiji as my desktop background, and I sort of flick to that when I'm making music, and I just picture what she's thinking, and it's almost all like I prefer ones that are like in a sort of a serious, like a more heavy, like it's just more of like a spiritual grounding for me, like an anchor.
so like
just to bring it full circle, because we have to sign off here pretty soon, but I want to bring it full circle back to the comedy aspect. Is I know, Bruno, you're saying that you like the more serious kind of riffs of the Naiji lady, and also that part of the interaction. I just want to mention that it is pretty much for both Naiji, male or female, a sense of humor is always part of them when they are highly developed. One thing that may be a way for you to note that, Bruno, is even very serious Nai alphas. One time you'll tend to see the giddy in them, even if they're very serious, is they may be watching your work, and that's motivating you to, like, I want to do a good job, I want to be clever, interesting, something that's going to push me, blah, blah, blah. And if you do it, the Nai will recognize that's a personal best, or often in the outer way, that's a kill strike. And if you have broken new ground, or you're like, that's, you know, kind of like you're killing the crowd, that's a killer. It might not be like a ha 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 kind of laugh, but there's a ha. It might be interpreted to you as like a high you'll get of like, yes, woo, like maybe not laughing, but almost like you want to like go woo, but it's not like normal. It's like this huge an endorphin rush.
I can see that, but I like at the whenever I'm at like whenever I feel like I'm firing on all cylinders and going into highest, I think of like a Greek statue, or like, you know, something like that. Like, it's just very spiritual. It's just like there's a whole piece to it. I don't know. It's hard to describe.
I think like a bit, because the image I have in my mind is like, for example, if I'm communing, say, with Nexi, and it's deep, it may seem like laughing is a bit out of place, and even often myself, and in our, you know, pairing, I'm the more serious one. So often there'll be periods where I don't feel it's appropriate to be giddy. It doesn't feel right, doesn't feel sacred or spiritual, elevated enough. But there will generally be some period, either just before, I always imagine almost in a way like being sexual, but at a spiritual level, where they're in the getting into, do we want to do this? There will be a little bit of humor, and then it get very serious and heavy. And then after like a culmination, there's like an afterglow giddy, but during maybe the main kind of passion or drive of it, it's for Nai-Ji, for example, it's a bit predatory. And it's spiritual and sort of like predatory at the same time.
That's the male side. It's interesting to see from the female Nai-Ji mother, which is what I commune with.
Right, of course.
I associate it more with like this this earth spirit, like giving birth to like the earth and like sort of it is destructive in a sense that it's destructing the old vibe, the old order.
Right.
But it's much more like feminine in that respect compared to like what you would experience personally in terms of like destruction and this sort of kill drive.
But actually, that is shared by Nai, male or female, is that it's about rebirth. That's why you pierce through, is to create a new welling that wasn't there before. That's why. But there are right. There are differences between the males and females.
There's just a lot less humor, I think, associated with the birthing process versus the killing thing, the killing side of it.
There's this thing that Nai-Ji do that they're like, it's like, where it's like to a Nijai, that's like they just busted out, cracking up, like it's like to the rest of the world it looks like,
Right.
and well, we know they busted out.
Indeed, I'm curious, Bruno, for example, how we may end on this one. How do you interpret the Nai-Ji comedian females that are out there? There's a few of them. They're generally considered formidable, but they do use a lot of humor. Does that seem less feminine, or is it
not less feminine? It's very appealing. Amy Schumer is a good one. I find her very funny. But see, the thing is, you almost never see Amy Schumer or Janine Garofalo laugh. It's very dry. Like you never see them giddy. Like they make jokes, and I think they're really funny. But they're never really giddy or laughing. They don't
crack themselves.
They don't really crack themselves, and that's something that I find very appealing. Like, and that's why I'm associating it almost more with spirituality. Like when you take anything to the highest level. At least the way that I see it with my personal other,
right.
It sort of transcends that giddiness, because I have no problem with that whole side of it. It goes beyond that into something more spiritual, which is what I do have problems with in finding a direction, a meaning, and that whole thing of no matter how funny the situation is, like Amy Schumer and Janine Garofalo, for example, you never rarely see them smile to begin with, and when they do, it's that very.
I have to note one thing, because I'm fairly familiar with comedy. There's certain things that are considered style choices. One is that there's a very old notion that a comedian should not laugh at their joke. So quite a few comedians go that route.
That'd be hard for me. If
you do laugh at your own joke, one thing that's often labeled at you is that you are getting carried away with your own material.
And I think that's leveled at women more often.
Yes,
I think that's why they choose that.
So I don't know if actually not laughing at your own jokes is a sign of more spiritual development. It's actually a sign that you're worried people miss you for laughing at your own jokes.
No, I agree. But even just smiling, like if you look at Kristen Schaal or Vanessa Bayer, for example, they're very smiley. It's a nervous, awkward kind of smile. But being Nijai, they're just naturally more smiley, and they just present that side much more easily.
I wonder how much it has to do with the fact that Nai-Ji ladies have to do more, seem like they would have to do more stone facing in general.
Yeah.
Because that, they would get sniped on.
Yeah, because
labeled as hysterical.
I feel that a mathematical sense that is that I definitely think
laughing at your own jokes can also be seen like as kind of a sign of dominance, sometimes in control. and that would incur more pointedness at you.
And I think they'll get backlash for that, probably.
More criticism. Yeah.
But I do think that if you take just this kind of mathematical, is that you may find it. I could see you may find that riff appealing when they're in that venue. But going from the point of view of, like, say, humor as an overall life thing, is that any for example, Gmojo is designed to have a fairly broad range of emotive expression. So if there was not a time ever somewhere in their life where a Naiji lady or Jinai lady were not actually giving full expression to their emoting and their pleasure in something, then it would mean that they were not.
Kind of stopped up a little bit.
They were stopped a little bit. I'm curious. I mean, would you be okay with them being giddy with just you, like not in general, like at special moments? Or would that throw you off to be giddy at all?
No, I don't. I wouldn't mind that, but I just feel like the expression, it would. I would prefer it to take like a different expression, like a non-spoken, non-physical expression. Almost think of somebody who would be like a spiritual leader or a yoga teacher or somebody who does more of those kinds of things. They would be more zide up, but not necessarily in a bad way, I think.
Yeah, but like I hung out with gurus, and they're really funny, and they crack jokes on the side when they're not in front of their students.
You would lack charisma if you didn't give. I think you can have a lot of Zai development, and it's good. But there would have to be some point where there is given more free rein to the expression.
Yeah, I mean, like Zai can actually, I mean, in certain ways accentuate the humor. Like it can kind of give you your own riff on the kind of humor you do. But I mean, if you do it too much, then it sort of becomes a deterrent to a lot of different things that you're doing.
It definitely sounds like Bruno has a taste for someone who has more strength, that shows more poise.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's
I personally just have, like, coming from where I come from in Brazil, like, I just have, like, a serious, like, I feel like a very serious problem with the world. Like, that was my first introduction to the world, and I think it's what gives me a lot of a Nai vibe that a lot of people think, which is just like, it's just like a war zone. It's just, like, so ridiculous. Like, it's not a place where, like, a sensitive Nijai would be like, oh, it's playtime and the whole world is a fairyland.
Right.
It's like
one of the most powerful things that Nai has, and it's considered one of the strongest powers they have. It's mentioned in literature and newspapers, everyone can think of, laughing at danger. It's one of our most powerful abilities that inspires all other humans.
See, and one of the best things about Naiji is when they can create that safe space, when they've got such control to hold the safe space, that I can play in the middle of a minefield. Like, as a Nijai, that I get to play in that minefield, and they've created that space.
But I see that a little bit more associated with the male Naiji, the her Naijas. The her-him Naijas, to me, is a little bit different. I think in fundamental ways we can agree that it would be different. So, yeah, the whole laughing at danger thing, I associate laughing at danger almost with male Nez.
No. I'm sorry, that's just not a fact.
Well, perhaps maybe male Naiji.
I have 3 very formidable Naiji ladies as my immediate relatives, and their ability to smile when things get gnarly, it's one of the things that people remarked about them over the years, that they find scary and devastatingly attractive.
Yes. Yeah, because I know.
But my sisters are more restrained. They don't tend to be ha 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 ha, but they chuckle or they smile when others will not. It shows that they are.
Yeah, that's interesting.
They're allowed to chuckle at stuff nobody else can laugh at. Like they have the strength
my sisters are touchy. They're touchy.
Yeah.
But they do laugh like your sisters who are married to Adrams that are Nijai. The times that they do laugh and chuckle is with their Nijai male.
Yeah.
That they make them feel safe enough and comfortable enough to like have that inner shiny baby kind of giggling and lighter sort of.
And I can tell you,
elements.
I'm not saying it's like Brazil, but I grew up in Baltimore, in the city, and if you're a white family, that's like, you're not native from there. They were three Naiji ladies that were having to be taken seriously pretty much all the time, but I actually think they would interpret not having the ability to laugh as being cowed by the environment.
Yeah, I think what I'm describing. I think what I'm describing is a shortcoming in my own relationship. It's not something that I think is universal. But given the memes and the culture, I wouldn't be surprised if many Nijai males share these kind of similar.
I just know you're totally entitled to have any kind of extreme riff preference. There's a whole range of healthy. I was just saying that I think at least at some point, maybe only special moments, few moments, private moments, to allow some levity in there.
Yeah, but it just, I don't know, it probably has to do with my own lack of development and lack of maturity, but it just feels like that would be like a small portion of an ideal relationship to me.
I think a small portion is totally legit.
And I think one of the things...
I hear you. That makes sense.
One of the things as a Nijai that I think of as my job with any Naiji that I'm in a relationship with is to create that place where he feels like he doesn't have to be the tough guy and he can show all of his range of emotion without me being judgmental about it. My place is to create that place where he can be safe, laughing and being a geek and being less than commander of the universe, like
all the Ni mojos, all four of them to their Nai mojo other, is that Nai it naturally has if you look at the comedic level, Nai naturally has a preference for humor like Ni does, but that's combined with an intense need to be taken seriously.
Right.
That is true, and so I can see Bruno, you really favoring that seriousness, but Nai does not actually necessarily separate humor from seriousness. It just means like how they do it, or a lot of times Nai will be, like you said, very understated. It may want to be a very understated form, or not in a way that maybe would be typically seen as a joke or anything like that. So that's totally.
I feel like there's definitely a way in like you can have the humor aspect and have what it is that you want to have, and not lose anything. You can have everything that you want to have as far as like having like a giddy moments, but it's not going to be like maybe like the way you think it might be. You just maybe need to discover how to make that work, how to find that for yourself, and then when you do, then it's sort of like, oh, now I can totally see the value in this.
And also, there's a wide kind like delivering. Like for example, if you come from a culture that's very stressful or has a lot of naturally restrainment to the culture, for example, then what counts as like giddy within that would be much lower. It would still be giddy in that context, but maybe it wouldn't seem as like the classical. If you say that the definition of giddy, you're like, that's not giddy. But within its natural fluctuations, say you're in an environment like you said, Brazil, it's very, very stressful and tough. A lot of like hard, real world question situations. The Nai would probably not be showing what you think is like giddy, because you're right, that would probably be out of place. But there will still be some fluctuations within whatever the environment is, I would think. Does that make sense at all, Bruno?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think built into my particular storyline, like one of the reasons I find Shakespeare, quote unquote Shakespeare, is actually probably Christopher Marlowe. Interesting. It's just the way he deals with tragedy and comedy. Like they're both interweaved as like a essential part of his work, and in many ways, like you can almost look at like the work, even if it wasn't written by Christopher Marlowe, which it was obviously, but even if it was written by someone else or whatever, it's obvious that whoever did that went through so many like negative and very harrowing experiences. Yeah. Sort of disillusioning them as to the essential nature of the human race, but somehow managed to rise above all of that, despite all those things. It's sort of like the triumph of the human spirit kind of thing, which is why it makes it what makes it so powerful, what makes it stand out. Like there were many other writers at the time who were just as popular, much more successful in terms of real life.
I'm curious on that though, Bruno, going along with that, this was the last thing, but to sign off, because it's getting a bit late, but I'll leave it with you, Bruno, the last one. I'm curious then how you interpret some of the ways actors and actresses have done parts in there, because there's a lot of witty dialogue.
Well, that's the thing, is that after that transition period.
I says there's a lot of witty dialogue. That's one thing, but then because of that, it's designed by Shakespeare to make the audience have a giddy reaction. Should the actors, in your mind, not feel that, or should they?
No. I think it's totally appropriate. I think that goes with the rising above the tragedy thing, because one thing that's noted that's a big difference between the works of Shakespeare and Christopher Marlowe, which is presumably the mature works and the immature works of the same person, is that the mature works actually have a lot more comedy. Like after he went through some serious problems in his life, like major issues, where he basically had to go into hiding and pretend to be dead, his comedy really blossomed after that, actually, and that's one of the main signs of maturity, is actually going beyond just like everything's
comedy really helps
horrible and the whole tragedy thing, so the comedy works of Shakespeare are really what sets him apart in many ways from the earlier works of just Christopher Marlowe.
And there's a lot of comedy and tragedy.
We have to sign off
now.
Yeah,
so playing both sides of that. I know. I think there's definitely a spiritual. I think you're right. There's definitely a lot of shortcomings on my own part in looking at things just as like needing to be serious all the time, because that's just not the nature of there's the dual nature of it, and I'm ignoring a lot of that in my own life and my own work, but I can't rush that. I just have to slowly grow into that.
So like one of the things, real quick.
Okay, real quick, and then we have to sign off.
At funerals, like there's been a lot of tragedy in my family, and at funerals, one of the things that as Nijai we're always noting is that we always end up just in tears of laughter, because there's so much humor in the telling of the stories, even the tragic stories.
And humor.
It's a way to release the process negative,
feelings
and things that are weighing on you, stressful.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so I'll sign off with this. Is just to kind of go what Bruno was saying. Is probably Shakespeare was using that himself, to elevate where he was already at. He's already a good storyteller, but then I think he had to kind of process some heavy stuff, and humor helps with that.
Yep.
Great discussion. That was really, really fabulous, everyone. I think the audience get a lot out of it. Okay, so I will see everyone on Sunday, and Bruno, whenever you get back in the able to we'll do an art thing. I'm looking forward to that a lot. So that's been very rewarding.
Thank you so much for everybody sharing. I really appreciated the stories.
This was super fun.
A lot of fun. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah,
okay, everyone.
Everybody.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night, guys.